In this clip, we are going to set up the shot for the final render. Before rendering my final output, I'd like to make two last adjustments. First, I'd like to add some anti-aliasing to my model here. If you zoom in the viewer, you will see that there is aliasing around my model. So to fix that, let's go inside the Skyline Render properties for my model and turn the anti-aliasing to medium. And this is it. The aliasing is gone. This attribute will really slow down your render time, so be careful with it. And I previously made some tests and I realized that the low setting wasn't enough and the high wasn't necessary. Find the right balance when you work with 3D, otherwise the render will take forever. Because I changed this Skyline render, I will need as well to change the two other Skyline renders relative to my model. So this one, which is the relight, and this one, which is the mask. I don't need to add anti-aliasing to my background, as we don't see any edges of my geo. As well, I don't need any with my particle system. As we can see there is no aliasing on my particles. I'm good to go. Now, before rendering, my second last adjustment will be the motion blur. To add some motion blur to my shot, I will need to visit again the Skyline Renders properties, and under the Multi-Sample tab, I will increase the sample. This defines how many frames I will use to generate my motion blur. Sometimes, when you are lucky and there is not too much movement, a low number like 3 could be enough. And for this course, 3 will be enough. So as you can see on my model, as soon as I enter 3, some motion blur appears on him. Great! Now I need to make this change in all my Skyline renders, even in the background one and as well the particles one. So I could do it manually, or I could use a script for doing it. Simply do a right click here and select Windows, then Script Editor to pop up the script editor. Here I wrote a really simple code for you. This first line will look for all the Skyline render nodes in your script. Then for each of them, it will set up the sample knob to whatever value you define here. I disabled this line, but using that one, you could set up here the anti-aliasing level. We don't need that for now, so I will disable it again. Now I will enter 3 here, select all my text, and hit Ctrl Enter or Command Enter on a Mac. And voila! All my Skylines render nodes have now a sample of 3. So it is fine everywhere, except for my particles. 3 isn't enough. If you look at it, we can see the 3 images used by Nuke to create the motion blur. And in order to get nice, smooth motion blur, I need to increase the sample by quite a lot. Let's try 5. Well, as you can see, 5 is not enough. Let's try 15. Yeah, 15 looks nice. But just to make sure we won't have any issues, I will use 18. There we go. So the problem with the aliasing and the samples we added is that now our script is really slow and the render will be very long. So depending on the power of your machine, I highly encourage you to create a pre-comp after each Skyline render. In this file, for example, I created a write node after each Skyline render. So I will have each of my 3D elements in a separate render. This is a great workflow because if only the background needs to be redone, for example, I won't have to re-render my heavy model. It will already be done. When setting up your pre-comps, make sure you are rendering all the channels you need. For most elements, I need only RGBA, but for some, like the particles, I need as well the depth as I use it with the Z defocus. Because I wanted to optimize the EXR file for my pre-comp, I use a remove node in order to keep only the RGBA and the depth channels. I won't go deeper about that as it's not the subject of this course. I previously rendered my pre-comps, so I will import them here. And now let's set up our final write node. Press W to create a write node and connect it at the very bottom of your comp. Specify a file path. So for me, inside the course material, I created a folder named render, and I will name my file jo_final output dot ## for the frames .exr. And this is it. Simply click on render, make sure the frame range is set to the entire duration of the shot, and click on OK. Even if I used pre-comps, the render will still take a couple of minutes. So before watching the final results, let's have a quick recap about what we learned in this module, and we will do that in the next clip.